With overall home sales at its lowest point in the last 2 years, rising interest rates, and overall unfavorable housing market conditions, it's no wonder that real estate agents need to come up with some creative ways to get you to buy a home. And in today's video, I am going to give you 6 lies that realtors will tell you right now in 2022 in hopes to convince you to buy a home. Now let me just say before we get into it that people are going to buy real estate no matter what I say on this channel, no matter what different real estate agents say. You know, people just find deals and they're interested in buying regardless of the market conditions. Sometimes people just need to move and they buy a home. That's not really what we're talking about here. We know those people are going to buy regardless of what anybody says. But what we're trying to address in this video is people basically being convinced or pushed into buying when they're not really sure, and basically taking someone else's word for it that everything's going to be okay. And that's the type of thing we're going to be addressing in today's video because, guys, I'm a real estate agent, but I'm an honest person. And at the end of the day, I never push anybody to do anything they don't want to do, regardless of whatever it is. And I don't think pushing someone to buy a home is the right thing to do either. So let's jump into the lies that real estate agents will tell you to get you to buy. The first one: if you're waiting for interest rates to go lower, it's unlikely because the circumstances that have created the ultra low interest rates probably won't be seen again for quite some time. So the idea here is you're telling someone, hey, you shouldn't wait for rates to go back down because, you know, by the time that happens, that's going to be who knows how long, which I agree. It's going to be a long time before rates come back down because they need to keep rates up right now to fight inflation. But the side of the story that agents are not telling you is that even though rates are up and they're probably going to continue to go up, we're starting to get more inventory on the market. We're seeing more price cuts in different housing markets across America. And with more of that inventory and more price cuts means a better deal for you as a buyer and most likely lower prices to come. And throw that on top of a looming recession. If that were to happen, which is looking more and more likely by the day, you're going to have even more inventory to choose from in the near future, which will ultimately drive prices down. So even though interest rates are higher, the prices will be lower. And that's going to bring us directly into our next point. The next lie that real estate agents will tell you is that if prices drop, your mortgage payment will still be higher due to the higher interest rates. Now, this could be true, but it does depend on how high rates can go because nobody really knows where the mortgage rates are going to end up, right? They predicted that the mortgage rates would be around 5% by the end of the year, and they're already hovering close to 6%, and it's not even summer yet. So we don't know how high interest rates are going to go. I personally think they're probably going to go higher than they are right now by the end of the year. And the Fed has already said they're going to continue to raise rates regardless of how it may affect the housing market or the stock market because getting inflation under control is their #1 concern. But here is the flip side, guys. As they continue to raise those rates, it will make housing become cheaper because less and less people will be able to buy a home at today's prices with increased interest rates, and that will force sellers to lower the price of their homes because there will be nobody left to buy them if they don't. So that's basically the situation we're facing right now. And not only that, I would much rather see you buy a home at a lower price at a higher interest rate than vice versa, buying a home at a high price and a low interest rate. Because here's the thing, you can never change the purchase price of how much you bought your home for. But if you buy your home at a lower price at a higher rate, you can always refinance down the road. Even if it takes 5 or 10 years for rates to get to a lower rate than you have now, eventually you'll save some money by refinancing down the road. But you can never change how much you purchase your property for. And the other reason that's a problem is because when you buy your property at all-time high prices, you're also going to get an all-time high tax bill, which is something we're going to be seeing over the next year. We're going to see a lot of buyers who recently bought get high tax bills, and they're going to be shocked at just how much their property taxes are going to go up. So I'd rather see you buy a property at a lower price, have that lower tax bill, and eventually refinance when conditions are favorable. The next lie is that buying versus renting helps build wealth in the long term and comes with tax benefits that renting does not. Now, that's not necessarily a lie. However, it is a bit of a scare tactic to get people to buy instead of rent because it basically says that renting is a waste of money, and I know a lot of you watching this video probably feel like it is. But I can personally tell you from my own experience that renting is not always a waste of money. There are definitely situations in life where renting makes a lot more sense. Say you're trying out a brand new area, you're not sure if you want to commit. Renting makes more sense. You just have a year lease, and if you don't like it, you pack up and move. You don't have anything to lose. My own personal scenario where renting made way more sense is I was renting a unit here in the building that I live in for about $2,200 a month. And to buy that unit back then would have cost around $4,000 a month. So I was saving almost half of the money that I would have been paying if I were to own that same unit. And one thing that actually pushed me to buy is because rents now here in Miami are so much higher than they were a couple of years ago, where the tables have now reversed, where it actually makes more sense to buy than it does to rent. And so because I was able to save so much money over the years renting, it actually allowed me to be able to buy the home that I'm in right now. If I was spending a fortune, paying for my previous place, I never would have been able to upgrade to this place because I just wouldn't have the leftover money to do so. And I also wouldn't have been able to make any other investments into things like gold, silver, Bitcoin, and other investment properties. So renting definitely paid off for me, and I'm sure it has for some of you as well. Definitely put in the comments if you've ever rented and were in such a great rental scenario that allowed you to get ahead in life. I'd love to hear about that. The next lie is that if you submit lowball offers, you will not be competitive and probably won't land the deal. Now, this one can be true. Now, as you can see, the common theme here, guys, is that there's like a little bit of truth in all of these lies. Now, that can be true. If you're looking at a scenario like 6 months ago when basically every single listing was selling over asking price, then yeah, submitting a lowball offer probably wouldn't be a good idea. But like I just mentioned in one of my recent videos, that right now is actually a great time to start submitting some lowball offers. And the reason is because we're already seeing more inventory coming to market, and we're seeing more and more listings out there with price cuts, which means that those listings were priced too high to begin with. Sellers do want to sell, otherwise they wouldn't be slashing the price. And this could be a good opportunity for you to jump in at an even lower price and see if they bite. You don't have anything to lose. Your agent's going to tell you not to do this because they don't want to waste their time writing up a bunch of offers that don't get accepted, because that's not a good way to spend your time as a real estate agent. And I agree, I wouldn't want to do that either. And that's why they tell you not to do it. But just keep in mind that for you as the buyer, it could pay off to write 40 lowball offers only to get one accepted later on, and you really end up getting a bargain that you wouldn't have gotten if you didn't write those lowball offers. The next lie is that buyers have unrealistic expectations based on today's market conditions, and they need to be advised to basically buy something that maybe they wouldn't normally buy, but you as their agent need to convince them to buy something that more suits what they can afford based on their needs. So this is basically flat out telling people that you need to convince them to buy something that's more realistic. Like if they have a list of criteria and only half of it can be met because of their budget or their location or both or whatever, then you as the agent need to convince them to just buy whatever's available. Now, I think that is just terrible, and the buyer is probably going to highly regret that decision if they do fall for that and they end up buying a house, for example, that only meets half of their needs, and after only 1 year of living there, they're super desperate and miserable, and they end up wanting to sell just to get out of it, and that could end up losing them a lot of money in the long run. So I think this is a terrible practice. As a buyer, I do think you need to be flexible in today's market, especially if you are still in a competitive market, but only you should be deciding which criteria points you're willing to compromise on and which ones you're not. And you need to be realistic with yourself. Like, let's say if you're in a market where you have a list of 10 different criteria points and every single home you can find only has half of them, then you probably are shooting too far above where you can actually afford, and it's probably not going to be realistic for you to buy a home, and then you probably shouldn't be buying, okay? Or you need to level with yourself and just say, listen, I need to take some of these things off the table and I will be happy with it. But either way, you need to do some convincing of yourself. Don't let somebody else convince you. The next lie is that buyers that can't afford to buy in their local market need to be encouraged to buy in a different market, and they should think of this as an investment. What? Hold on a second, guys. Okay, this kind of goes back to what we just talked about. Nobody should ever be convincing you to buy somewhere different than you originally thought about buying unless you're open to it. Maybe if you're going to be retiring to an area like Florida and said, maybe you were thinking about moving to Fort Lauderdale, but it's too expensive, so I'm going to go to Port St. Lucie instead. Maybe that's a decision you can make, but you should be making that decision. Don't let your real estate agent tell you this, because that is only for you to decide. Nobody should be telling you where you should live based on prices or your criteria or whatever. Now, if you realize yourself that you probably are going to be priced out of the market you're going to want to be in, then yes, maybe you should be exploring some alternatives. And, that's not the worst advice in the world. But the thing is, once they go back to saying they should think of it as an investment, to me, this is kind of crazy. Because if you're going to buy a property, most people who buy are looking for themselves, right? There are some investors out there. There's always going to be, institutional investors and mom and pop investors. But the reality is most people out there buy a home for themselves or their family to live in, and it's not an investment, guys. If the property's not paying you cash flow, it's not an investment. It's a liability because you pay money out of your pocket every month to pay for that house. It's not an investment until you turn around and sell it and make a profit on it, or you turn around and rent it out to a tenant and that property pays you return each month. If one of those things is not true, it's not an investment. So don't let any real estate agent tell you that the property needs to be looked at as an investment, or you should be looking in alternative areas if you can't afford where you're in, because that's only for you to decide. Now, more and more buyers are starting to give up on the idea of buying a home, and this could be really good news for you as a home buyer. And if you want to learn more about that, then check out this video right over here, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.